Welcome to Slim Nation's One-on-One podcast with conversations featuring the host, James Slim Overton.
Well, hello everybody, and good morning. And here I am again today, and we want to welcome all the watchers and listeners on Facebook and my YouTube channel, Slim Nation One on Ones podcast. And I have a special guest here with me this morning, and her name is Tamika Quinn, and she is a two-time stroke survivor, not swimming stroke, but that stroke that you're thinking about when you first heard it. But anyway, she's a guest, and I feel sort of a kinship with her because both of us have had heart issues, and I think that's how we met. Can't exactly remember. I don't know if it was at one of the heart galas or through Facebook, both of us talking about our issues. But anyway, we have sort of had a bond as far as that's concerned, and I've been following her and the things that she's been doing all these years. And of course, she's a multitasker, just like most women are, especially African American women. They learn to do it all. A motivational speaker. You can see some of her titles on there: motivational speaker, author, success coach, moderator, businesswoman, and I guess whatever else comes up. And the most important thing, a mother of three daughters. One, the youngest one, who is Aggie at North Carolina A&T. Wow, that's special. The HBCU power team. But well, good morning, Tamika. How you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for agreeing to be here. And I wanted to, all the things. The title I had up there is Strength to Faith, and as we talk, people will understand why I chose that title. But with all the things that you did, multitasking, one of the things, and you've done these interviews, and a lot of people know of your story, of your journey, and there are some people that may not. But anyway, you came here from Philly, so I'm assuming that most of your childhood up to adulthood was in Philly until the Navy brought you here. Am I correct?
Yes.
So the Philly, the time you grew up in Philly and things, what are some of the things that happened to probably that you didn't know it then, but sort of motivate you or influence you to be such a go getter like you are, even through all the health issues you had? It had to be something going on in Philly in those younger days that shaped the woman who you are today. So talk a little bit briefly about your Philly days, because most of the time you talk about the times you are here. So I want to know what went on in Philly and what kind of student you were and how you were coming up in Philly.
That's a great question. I typically get asked similar questions over and over, the same type of questions, but no one has ever asked me that. And I tell you that just even thinking about that, Philadelphia had a lot to do with the type of woman that I am today. I'm the oldest of three, and my mother was 16 years old when she had me. And so we were and she was the youngest of seven children. And so for us, I was sort of raised in a way that was like my mother's sibling, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
because we lived in my grandparents'
We're
home.
close together in age, wasn't that?
Right, and so my grandparents were sort of like my mother and father figures. And my grandmother was like my mother figure. In fact, I called my grandmother mama my whole life.
Wow.
And I called my grandfather daddy my whole life. That's how, much we were raised. My mother and I were raised as siblings. And so when my brother and sister came along, I almost took like you're the big sister, you're going to make sure nothing happens to them. I remember starting to cook meals and wash clothes, and we didn't have a washer and dryer in our home. We used the laundromat. So taking a shopping cart with our dirty laundry to the laundromat, I was about fifth or sixth grade. And so from a young age, moving into a leadership, mindset, very young, taking on a leadership role in our home because, and I remember having conversations with my mom about, us wanting to be a family on our own. Not that there was a problem in my grandparents' home, but that my mom wanted to move us into a better neighborhood, into a better environment. And that was always the goal, to get us out of North Philly and into
Mm.
a better environment. And so, in order to do that, we had to be a team and we had to work together. And that meant that I had to step my game up from a very young age. And that meant I had to do more and I had to assist my mom and get into that goal. And I didn't have a problem doing that.
Yeah, and that's why I always ask that question of many of my guests. Going back into their adolescence and into adulthood, because it has so much a profound effect on their lives later on. And one of the reasons I do that as well, to stress the importance of how we treat our young folks now. Listen to them, make sure, and we can't dismiss them like they don't know what's going on. They are aware of what's going on in their environment. So we can't just say, most of the time when I was coming up, you be around adults, they say, be quiet, grown folks talking. But now you want to include these kids in the conversation now because they are far more advanced than we are with all the gadgets and social media that they have, that they are learning things before we get a chance to tell them. That's why it's important we involved in that education early on. But anyway, thanks for going back there, because it's always a story, from where you came. Most of the time we meet people, they're already adults, and we don't know what motivated them to be where they are today. So before we leave that affiliate, I just want because you talk to a lot of people as a motivational speaker, and I have too, talking about heart health and being, aware of your body and your family history. Before you had your issues, were you aware of any kind of family history that, because I noticed you put in one of your writings how strokes are like 80% preventable, you know,
Yes.
if you have the knowledge, if you're aware of your family history, one, and the signs of early strokes, because sometimes they come earlier than the ones that really put us out. So were you aware before any of your issues that it was important for you to know that your family history of your grandparents and beyond?
And not just if you are aware, if you also eat properly
Mm-hmm.
and avoid certain things that are going to contribute to you having a stroke. So that 80% that is preventable, we're talking about doing the things that can prevent stroke, like not having a sodium intake that's going to cause you to have a stroke, or not eating foods that are going to contribute to you having a stroke, or not just simply avoiding exercise or avoiding being heart healthy, and thinking that that mindset is going to prevent you, that you are so special that you can go through your whole life without eating healthy and having any type of cardio exercise, and you're just going to happenstance not have a stroke. So that is the 80% prevention that we're talking about here. I'm sorry, repeat your question.
Well, I was just saying, you kind of touched on that too. I was just saying, before you had your health issues, were you aware how important it is to know about your family history? Or that didn't come about, like myself, didn't come about or thinking about that until I had my health issues,
Right.
and started educating myself and trying to educate others. So I've said that, asked that because a lot of us are not aware up until that point that we have some issues, that, wow, if I had known, and then once I found out, the heart issue was all in my family. I had no
Right.
idea. And I'm sure some of my the activities I was doing contributed to what was already in my genes. And if I had known, I might have, sort of made better choices as far as, my eating habits. And I was a smoker, and things like that. So, but I just brought that up to say it's just so important to know that family history.
Well, sometimes in our families, I'm just going to keep it real.
Hmm.
We don't disclose what our issues are.
No.
And so, I never had a conversation with my family on either side. I was 27 when I had those strokes, right?
Hmm.
And I was married. I'd had 3 children at this time. Even in having 3 children, you go through your OB doctors, 9 months being pregnant. They ask a lot of questions about family history. Never had I asked my family anything about their business. Okay.
Hmm.
Because I knew my family. My family would tell me it's none of your business. It's none of your
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And
Grown folks talking.
right, right. So even after I had the strokes, it was the same thing. It was the same kind of, it's my business. I'm not going to share it with you. And
Hmm.
I had to get to a point where it was like, look, this is for my children. I need for my children to know what their history is moving forward. And it's not about you, it's about my kids. And I had to have some really tough conversations with my family. And I was astounded at the medical history that was in my family after having some of these tough conversations that I had no idea about. So sometimes you have to really talk with your family and tell them why you need to know family history, that it's not about them. They shouldn't be embarrassed, that this is about the children who are coming after them so that they can now be proactive versus being reactive with getting tests involved, getting the type of checkups that they need to have. Because I'm gonna tell you, some folks that don't look like us, they know their family history. They're
Yeah.
getting they're getting physicals that involve being proactive, and that's why they're living longer. That's why,
Hmm.
because they know their family history. Their family isn't ashamed to say, we need to be tested for X, Y, and Z because Uncle Bobby and Aunt Susie has so and so. But us, we go into the doctor, we're clueless. We're baffled why at 20 something years old, we're coming down with something that we never heard of because we can't talk about it.
Yeah. And it's also important to be proactive when you're in that doctor's office. You know, they're human too. And sometimes they will talk like we went to medical school and goes over our heads, or, they can misdiagnose too. And bringing that up, I saw another interview you had, and it's kind of relevant to today as we talk about African American women and birth and the birth rate of African American women dying after birth or at birth, and I didn't realize in these days, in these present days, that was still going on. Is because for a lot of reasons, and you kind of touched on that. Some they think that the black women are because of slavery and because we endured through a lot of things that we can we'll go through things and easier than somebody else. And I'll make a point. Yesterday, when I was at the emergency room, it was an African American lady in there, and she was in there screaming in pain. And it was like, I don't know if they knew her or she was a regular, but it was like, we'll get to you when we get to you. Or we can't give you anything right now. We're waiting on this. So it might have been a reason for that. But me initially sitting there watching that, I said, now, if that had been somebody else, the way she was screaming in pain, I think they probably would have addressed it sooner. And that's just me thinking. There might have been a whole lot more to it, but that was just an example to me. And I think one of the times you had one of your strokes, your first stroke was not too long after birth, after you had a child, or was it?
Yes. So I think it's only by the grace of God I'm here talking with you alive. Um, I have my last daughter, and by the way, I have a son and 2 daughters. My
Mm-hmm.
son is the oldest, and I have 2 daughters. And so my youngest child, Sequoia, I
Well, I
had her.
said 3 daughters. I'm sorry.
No worries. And during that pregnancy, I developed preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure.
Mm.
I never had high blood
Never
pressure.
had.
No, I developed it during the pregnancy. And my OB told me, "Oh, it'll be okay. It'll go away once you deliver the baby." And it never did. It was a problem throughout the pregnancy, and it got worse during the delivery. And so they had to keep me a day longer in the hospital because it kept going up. It didn't go away. It continued to get higher. And so they delivered me. I mean, they did discharge me that extra day after. And then I went home and then my blood pressure continued to get higher. So 10 days after I had had my daughter, I woke up with the worst headache of my life. I felt like an elephant was sitting on the top of my head. And that day, my vision got smaller and smaller, all signs of a stroke. Um, I could no longer see anything but a small spot by the end of the evening. My speech was slurred. You name it. I mean, it was just every telltale sign of a stroke by the end of the day. By the time I get back to the hospital, I peed on myself. I passed out. They rushed me back to ICU. I'm passed out. 3 days later, I wake up with a bleed on the right side of my brain. Left side of my body's paralyzed. A few days later, I have a second stroke on the front lobe of my brain. All of this because of the strokes that I've had because of me having my daughter. It's all connected. And to think that if I had possibly been addressed while I was in the hospital having her, I might not have had those strokes. If my blood pressure had been addressed at that time, I can't say that I wouldn't have had those strokes,
Mhm.
but it may not have gotten to that point. I may not have gone there, but I have been continually brushed off. I called my OB doctor that day. She said to me, "I don't have any way to put you into to see me today." I went to patient first that day. Patient first they couldn't touch me. You're under your OB's care for 6 weeks after you have a baby. Patient first took my blood pressure. They said your blood pressure is out of control. We definitely can't touch you. They called my OB doctor from patient first, and my OB doctor said, "Give her something for pain and send her home." At this point, my eyes were bloodshot red from crying for hours. I was in so much pain. And patient first legally could not touch me, but they did call the OB doctor. And so I understand what being brushed off looks like. I understand what it feels like. And even after being in the hospital for 4 weeks after having those strokes, I was discharged. And the night before being discharged from the hospital, I had chest pain. And I said, "My chest is hurting really bad." The doctor said, not the doctor, the nurse said, "You're probably anxious for about to go home." I said, "No, I want to go home." "No, you're probably just having anxiety." And I said, "I don't know what that means, but my chest hurts." And she comes back and she says, "We're going to give you some Mylanta." And I thought, okay, so is Mylanta for chest pain? She brings the Mylanta and I take the Mylanta and my chest still hurts. So that night, that entire night, my chest continues to hurt. The next morning, they discharge me to go home and I say, "My chest still hurts." "Oh, you'll be fine, Miss Quinn. You're just anxious to go home." And I think, are they slow? Like I'm telling you my chest hurts and you're still saying you're going to send me home. Okay. I get home and by this time I can't lean back. So every time I lean back, my chest hurts way worse. So a couple hours pass at this point, and it's to the point where I have to stand up. I can't even sit down. So I said, I got to go back to the hospital. I just got out of the hospital from having 2 strokes. I've been in the hospital for 4 weeks and I called 911. The ambulance comes and the paramedics say to me, "You probably pulled a muscle picking your baby up. You just make an appointment with your doctor." This is what the paramedics say to
Yeah,
me.
all these people are making diagnoses,
Yeah. Yeah. And
without a medical degree.
right. By now I have labored breathing. I'm in distress. And the paramedics say to me, "We're not going to take you to the hospital. You probably pulled a muscle. Call your primary care and make an appointment." I couldn't believe it. and mind you, I filed a grievance with the city of Virginia Beach for those paramedics. And this was years ago. My daughter's 21 years old now, so this was 21 years ago. But when we talk about the difference between what you look like and the type of care that you receive, it's real. It's real. Who does that? How do you, as a paramedic, come to someone's house that's in dire need of emergency services and make that determination as if you were a doctor, for one, but to leave someone at home that needs to be in an emergency room? It makes no sense. And I
Especially
can
with chest pains. Chest
chest
pains or trump you to the front of the line in the emergency room. At least it's supposed to.
it's
Uh,
supposed to. It's
yeah.
supposed to. So that evening when my husband got home from work, we go to the hospital. I sat in Norfolk General, and I had just been discharged that morning from being in the hospital for 4 weeks. I sat in the ER for another 4 hours. And when I got to the back, they did a CAT scan of my chest and immediately rushed me into surgery. I was having a bilateral pulmonary embolism. That means
Mm.
blood was almost completely filled in both of my lungs from a blood clot that had come from my legs from being in the hospital, mind you, for 4 weeks, stationary. A blood clot came up from my legs and into my lungs. So the very hospital that I had just been discharged from literally almost killed me, and then barely refused to take me back to help me. It just amazes me, the type of care, and I can only imagine why it took that long.
Yeah, and you don't have to have a medical degree to be an advocate for yourself in medical situations. You just have to be persistent enough. And I went through one of those things where, thank God, one of the nurses was persistent. I was already in the hospital having issues. They took my thyroids out, so having issues. And the doctors came up there, looked at him, and thought he'll be okay. And when they left, I said, no, something is wrong. And then they wouldn't come back up. And so the nurse I had, she was so persistent and finally got. And when they came back up, they came and took one look at me, ran out the room, came out and had to perform emergency surgery on right up in here on the bed.
Oh,
So if that nurse hadn't have been persistent, now I was in the heart hospital, so they had to come up. And these guys at night, you have to call doctors from the emergency room, and they came up one time and just checked me and said, "Oh, he'll be okay." And when she called out, he said, "Well, I told you he'll be okay." And then she got him up there, and then they came and ran out the room and came back with all this equipment and had to, and I might not have made it, but just say that to say, and in most cases, the hospital give you great care.
right.
But the point I think both of us are trying to make, you just have to be an advocate for yourself and make sure people that are around you are advocates for you, just in case you can't do that,
Yeah.
and just educate yourself as much and don't try to be a doctor, but ask those questions. I always tell people it's the reason when you go to the doctor asks you all these questions. Sometimes you get frustrated. I thought you're the doctor. Why you ask? He has no idea. He has to ask those questions to get a hold exactly what's going on with you.
Right.
So if he has to ask all those questions, then I think you should too if you want to know, what kind of care they're giving you, no matter how frustrated they get. And if they don't give you the answers, go to someone else. But anyway, just wanted to make that point, and I think that's something that you share and I share a lot that people should know. Let's get into, you know, then you're home and well, one of the things you did, you want to work for yourself, and is that where the glam girl job came in, where you could do something and not do a 9 to 5? I guess you wanted to. You had the 3 children, and maybe you want that kind of 9 to 5 person, but you wanted to do something. Those growing up in Philly, like we talked earlier, it put in you that you wanted to do something more than that 9 to 5. So you created that glam girl, which sort of started you into all the other different things that you do now. So explain briefly what that glam girl event was, or
Actually,
program rather.
glam is giving life and motivation,
Okay,
and
it's an acronym.
Yes, and we started that actually on my husband's hospital bed. My husband passed
No.
away in 2011 from thyroid cancer, and my girls and I, we were literally trying to figure out what mommy can do to not go back to work. And it was a conversation about me not going back to work. Um, and we were talking about it because of so much time being spent, um, helping my husband through his therapy, and at that point, knowing there was a possibility that he wasn't going to make it. And
Mm.
we have real conversations with my children, and it was trying to figure out what I was going to be able to do to stay home with them. And we were thinking about all different ideas. And right before he had gotten really sick, I was a Girl Scout troop leader. And so we were thinking about things that I like doing, and working with kids was definitely one of them. And um, Pink Carpet Glam Girl was what we decided I was going to do. And so it was a spa for girls, and mentoring girls and having spa parties was the first thing that we were going to do together as a family. And that's how Glam Girl was birthed, literally on the hospital bed, on my husband's hospital bed.
You haven't done a 9 to 5 since, have you?
No.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. And then you ventured into writing books, and you already were going around doing motivational speeches at churches and different organizations, wherever people would invite you. And then I guess you said, well, let me put some of these things down to pen. Let me put it to pen in the form of a book. So what motivated you to do that? Because most of the books I can see. How many books have you written? So you have books you have written, and you also have helped other authors get published. Which is another thing that you do. So how many books have you actually written?
I've actually just finished my ninth personal book this week. Um, and that book is entitled Empowered Author 21 Steps How to Write a Book, um, which I'm excited about because a lot of
Yeah.
people ask
I
me.
want to get that. That's available, right? Uh,
Yes, yes, yes. It's on the website
okay.
getpublished.shop. A lot of people ask me how to write a book, and how can I write my own book, or I have had this idea for years and how can I get it going. And even if you don't want me to assist you in publishing the book, I put these steps together from start to finish, how you can write your own book. And it truly empowers anyone who wants to do that. So yeah, so I've written 9 books.
Yeah, well, that's good because a lot of people, my thing, everybody has a story to tell, and
Yes.
just everybody just doesn't know the process and how to go about it. But your other books too are also related to health issues you have gone through, even with your weight. The one change your mind, change your waistline. And I guess it has to start up here. You
Absolutely.
have to have that focus in your mind. Before you can change anything physically about yourself. I mean, so I guess that's the reason for the title of the book and the premise of the book.
Yes. And years ago, if people think that I've lost 80 pounds and my daughter
Oh,
has lost 40 pounds, and we did this years ago. And people always assume that in our weight loss journey, it was because I had strokes and went through my medical journey that was the reason that I lost weight. And it wasn't. I had those strokes, got out of the hospital, came home, and went right back to eating. I resumed my life as usual. And there was never a shift. And that's living proof that you can go through something very difficult, something very hard, and never make any changes for yourself. My change came when my daughter went through something very difficult. And so I had 2 strokes, I had a pulmonary embolism, and I still didn't change the way I was eating. I was still eating fried foods. I was still very sedentary in my lifestyle. And then my 8-year-old daughter, who was also overweight, and I say also because I was overweight, had high blood pressure, still living a very unhealthy lifestyle. But my 8-year old daughter was overweight as well, and she developed severe high cholesterol. And I remember my children getting a physical, and I thank God for this physician's assistant who said to me, as my two daughters were getting their physicals at the same time, she looked at me and she said, "Your girls are 3 years apart and they're vastly different in size. You don't see anything wrong with that?" And I really wanted to fight her. And I
Mm,
said, "What?" And she said, "Your girls, they're 3 years apart. You don't see anything wrong with how vastly different in size they are." And she had her chart there, and she has their two physical paperwork together because she's doing their physicals at the same time. They're both with their gowns on in the room, and she's charting. And she says, "You don't see anything wrong with that?" And I said, "No." And I wanted to ask my kids to step out in the hallway. This is my mindset.
mm,
And I said, "No, you know what? I think Holy Spirit was talking to me, and I was like, I'm just gonna be quiet and I'm gonna listen to what she has to say." And she's talking and she's saying these things in front of my children. She said, these they shouldn't be this far gap in their size. And my kids are sitting on the bed listening, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is not right. This is just not right. And she said, "Yeah, this is the size that they should be for this age." And she's telling me the size, and she's going through the chart. She's holding the paper up. "And this is the size they should be for this age. And let me just get some blood work." So then she orders the labs. And I'm so heated at this point. As a mother, I'm heated, but I
right,
don't
right.
say anything. And then she orders the labs, and then they get some blood sticks in their fingers, and she does all these other things. And then she says a little bit later, "Oh no, this one this one's has her cholesterol is really way too high. She needs to go over to CHKD right now." And I'm thinking to myself, this woman is really trying me today. I can't believe this. So she tells them they can put their clothes on. This one is fine. This one is fine, but this one needs to go to CHKD immediately for her cholesterol. She needs to see a cardiologist. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. When she said cardiologist, everything that I had gone through with strokes, it was like a flash before my
Mm.
eyes. And I just knew that that
You
wasn't a
definitely
real.
don't want that for your children.
No, I just
Mm,
didn't. And I felt like it didn't matter what they told me that we had to do. I was just gonna do it. And and I was mad that day, but I was the kind of mad that was going to force me to be driven. And if 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 you're a mom, it's a different kind of mad. I think that if as mothers, well, the way that we are about our children, it's a protection type of a mindset that just nothing's going to happen. We're not going to let anything happen to our kids. And that day it was, "Your cholesterol is so high, you're going to have to see a cardiologist." "Oh no, we're going to fix this." And so we went and saw the cardiologist, and the cardiologist was basically saying that, "Oh, she needs to be on statins." And I Googled statins that day, and statins had so many side effects. And the
yeah.
main one that I saw was that she could be infertile, hair fall out, all kinds of things. But infertile was the one that stood out. And I said, there's no way that I'm going to do something to my daughter that could cause her to later not be able to have kids. And so, what are the alternatives? And the doctor said, "Oh, well, the alternatives is diet and exercise, but nobody ever has success with that." And he said it in a way like that's a joke. And I said, "Oh, well, that's what we're gonna do." And he didn't want to have that answer. And he left out of the room, and he went and got another cardiologist to come back and co-sign for him. And that second cardiologist came in and was like, and mind you, my husband's sitting there and he's not saying anything. And the second cardiologist comes in and he's like, "Mr. and Miss Quinn, yeah, we this is very serious. Your daughter needs to take these medications." And I was like, "We're not doing that. I see these side effects, and we're going to go the diet and exercise route." And we left. And CHKD had a program called Healthy You. And this is the thing that I think is very important. it's not that you can't, say no to something, but you have to always find out what the alternative is and still be willing to do the work. And we were willing to do the work. And so CHKD has a program called Healthy You. We enrolled in that program right away, and as a family learned about nutrition, about exercise, met with therapists, met with other cardiologists, met with other doctors as a family to change our lifestyle, to learn how to change our lifestyle at home, and did that
As a family.
as a family. Because
Mhm.
see, it's not just the child that has the problem, it's an entire family that has the problem. And I think that if you have a child that is overweight, you're not going to fix it by saying you have a problem, because it's not the child that has the problem. The child doesn't buy the groceries, the child doesn't cook meals, the child doesn't have a problem. It is the entire family that has to be on board with the change. And in my book, I talk about that. I talk about the lifestyle of the entire family. And no change is going to be made by one person, not in a family, not in a family. It has to be everybody on board as a team.
Well, Tamika, sadly, we're going to have to end this particular broadcast, but I want to have you back because there's a lot more I want to talk to you about, especially getting into the strength through your faith and how important faith played a part in your recovery and your continued success and your continued recovery. Because just like any patients like you and myself, we're going to be going through things the rest of our life. Things will come up, and we just have to remain faithful and just take it one day at a time. But
Yes.
I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. And like I said, we're going to bring you back and talk about the faith and some more of your books, especially Stroke Magic, the Stroke Magic Journal, and Love Yourself First. I believe they are two other books that are very important that people need to read. But before we go, tell people how they can get in touch with you, or if they need a motivational speaker or a success coaching or moderator or whatever the things you do, how to get in touch with you and how to get in touch with how to find your books.
Absolutely. All of my books are on Amazon.com. Or you can get them directly from my website, www.tamikaquinn.com.
Which is
And
probably better because the money goes directly to you, right?
yes.
Okay. I'm
I'm
not. I'm
also
not. I'm not putting off Amazon if that's the way you want to go. But if you can go directly to a website, you can cut out the middle person.
yes. I'm also on Facebook at author Tamika Quinn, and on Instagram, author Tamika Quinn. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I want to say this too. Anybody that goes to your Facebook page, the first thing they'll see is this: I am the epitome of the word survivor. If you know my story, you should know you can survive too. You know what? And I'll just leave it at that. And I want to thank everybody for watching the Slim Nation One-on-One podcast, and come back next time as we bring Tamika Quinn back and some of our other exciting guests. And remember, be aware, be informed, and most of all, be involved, especially when it comes to your health. And your vote is your voice. Make sure you get out there and take care of that. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Tamika. Have a great day. God bless you.
Thank you.